Hello there, and welcome to TVS Correspondent, where you get to know what's truly inside the happenings in the United States and around the world. Here with me, Shahmina, and with me here today is our correspondent for the United States of America, who is now in Washington, D.C., Alfian Zaini. Alfian, it's a pleasure to meet you, albeit virtually. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Likewise, it's a pleasure to see you too, Cheryl. Yeah.
Right, Alfian. So now a lot has been happening in the US recently, and one event in particular that I'm pretty sure shocked the entire world. Also, in netizens abroad in the film industry, leaving netizens mourning as well. So this is the case of the accidental shooting, right, on the set of Rust after a firing of a prop gun on set, and with the victim identified as Helena Hutchins, a well-known cinematographer, also a very dominated female. A very female in a male-dominated industry. So, Alfan, maybe you could share to our viewers today some background on this incident occurring in the Hollywood landscape.
Sure, Cheryl. The role of a prop gun in the onset shooting death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins was described as shocking. Alec Baldwin was handed what was described as a safe cold gun on the set of his movie Rust, but the prop gun contained live rounds when it was fired, according to the details of the police investigation into the fatal shooting. The shot hit Hutchins in the chest and director Joel Souza, who was sitting behind her, in the shoulder. While the exact type of weapon used in the shooting on the set of Rust remain unclear, the film's assistant director grabbed one of the three guns placed on a table by the armorer. The assistant director took the gun to Baldwin, handed it to the actor, and yelled, "Cold gun," in an indication that the prop gun did not have live rounds. Cheryl.
I see. So, Alfian, what we know here, according to law enforcement statements, Hutchins was shot around 1:50 p.m. Thursday local time, and then was airlifted to a hospital but died of her injuries. And then now, what sparks the highlight of the issue here is that an on-set shooting death like this has reignited concern about the use of prop guns like the weapon the actor Alec Baldwin discharged in the killing of Helena Hutchins. So, what is your take on that?
Well, Cheryl, investigations remain ongoing, with many people asking how such a tragedy could happen on a film set. When actually, for the viewers' information, it has been 28 years after Bruce Lee's son, Brandon Lee, if you remember, was accidentally killed on set by a firearm. Similarly, yeah. So yes, indeed, Cheryl, this case has definitely sparked concern. With some prop guns are non-firing facsimile weapons, but many are real guns actually, loaded with blank rounds instead of bullets.
I see. So now, how about the use of prop guns? Now that in productions, using prop guns have designated weapon handlers or armorers tasked with watching the weapons on set. They have to regularly check that they are only loaded with needed and intended material and ensuring that actors use them safely. However, this case has been prompting a debate in the industry now. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alfian?
Sure. Prop guns have long been used on sets for the realistic visual effect of the flash and recoil after an actor actually pulls the trigger. Guns with blank cartridges, which lack a bullet but use gunpowder, can be fatal at close range. But Hutchins' death has reignited concern about their use. So they are in need in this industry for a call to action to reinvest the protocols and reinvest them. Cheryl.
I see, I see. So it is indeed a very landmark case for this. And the verdict now, right, before we move on to the next development, we'll be right back with TBS correspondent after this commercial break. We are back on TVS Correspondent, here with me, Sheryl, and our United States correspondent, Alfian Zaini, where before the break we were talking about a controversial issue on the misfire of Helena Hutchins, raising an awareness in the need for film industry players to revise these protocols. Now let's move on to another current issue in the US right now is the surge in gun violence in the United States, which is on Friday, October 22. Findings found data that the rate of gun violence in the US surged by almost a third, with around 51,000 incidents of gun violence across the US during the 13-month period of the pandemic. Right off here.
And Cheryl, to add to that, just to let you know, from March 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2020, the surge was from nearly 39,000 during the preceding 13-month period. Apart from that as well, gun homicides in the US were also a leading issue. Evidently, the rise was during the pandemic month. However, studies found that it was not linked to the rise in gun sales after all. They were not related peculiarly, weirdly, right? So, yeah, Cheryl. Mhm.
Yeah, so this brings back to the issue, Alfian. Could these possible reasons due to the mental effects of the pandemic, seeming that COVID-19 has impacted a widespread of problems in the society, mainly not physically, but mentally, economically. So could this be a factor which might be related to the surge of gun violence, a factor I can say from citizens are economic stresses from the pandemic, alongside soaring firearm sales, could be responsible for the sharp increase, seeing that the data matches with the timeline of the lockdown in March 2020.
Now, Americans have bought nearly 17 million guns so far in 2020, more than in any other single year, an estimated total from a firearms analytics company. Gun sales across the United States first jumped in the spring, driven by fears about the coronavirus pandemic, and spiked even higher in summer during massive racial justice protests across the country, prompted by police killings of Black Americans. So, to answer your question, there did appear to be some association between the increase in gun purchasing and an increase in domestic violence gun injuries in April and May, but that correlation might also be explained by other factors, including increased substance abuse or the decreased access to domestic violence support services during the early months of the lockdown. We also need to be looking at other factors as well, like job loss, economic changes, the closure of schools, and community organizations and nonprofits and civil unrest, of course. There is a large body of research demonstrating the correlation between gun access and increased risk of gun injury and association that is particularly clear when it comes to the risk of gun suicide. Right, the increase in shootings during 2020 may have been driven by Americans who already have guns before the pandemic, but not only by the people who bought guns for the first time in their life last year.
I see, I see. Now, thank you for your insight, Afian. And from this, I think we can conclude this issue raised interesting questions about whether the increase in gun violence might be more closely connected to some Americans' willingness to carry their previously purchased guns during the pandemic, so which carries the surge in the rise of it, and rather than a spike in first time gun purchases, which is related to gun sales. So, however, that gun access is irrelevant, but more towards the ownership of the gun itself. So two main issues which we have highlighted earlier today, Fian, I think is mostly on the use of prop guns, to the worrying surge of homicides and to gun violence in the US, which sparks a very raising concern. And I think this is one of the issues that should be highlighted today. Now, although this is not a diverse topic, however, there is a need to be the centerpiece of how this can be used to educate the public. Now, so Alfian, thanks again for joining us, and let's wrap up to the edition of TVS Correspondent. We'll be back for another segment next week. Thank you, Alfian.
Certainly, Cheryl. My pleasure.